Hi everyone, and welcome once again to this self-knowledge course. Today we have the lecture number 29 of our set of 50 lectures that comprises the phase A or first part of this self-knowledge course. In this lecture we are going to study another one of the 48 laws that governs this physical world, which is the law of the pendulum. And well, for those who are walking the path of self knowledge, actually understanding this law is essential because it helps us to see how can we truly reach the truth in everything, and more importantly, how can we discover the truth within ourselves. So, in this lecture, we will learn how this law operates, how it influences both the external world and our inner world, and most importantly, how can we transcend it in order to reach that is known as the truth. And well, what is a pendulum? A pendulum is a weight that is like suspended from a fixed point, allowing it to swing freely, right? And well, traditionally, it was often a rod with a weight at its end that was used to regulate the mechanism of the clocks that used to rely on the pendulum's oscillating motion to function, right? And well, actually, the movement of the pendulum carries a profound meaning. It invites us to reflect on how absolutely everything that unfolds over time in this world and in our personal lives, and even within our own psychology, follows this same rhythm, this same law, the law of the pendulum. Actually, in life, everything ebbs and flows, things rise and fall, increase and decrease, come and go, all according to this marvelous law. The law of the pendulum teaches us that everything is subject to the fluctuation of time, and in time, everything evolves and then devolves, right? Moving from one extreme to another. And actually, here lies a vital teaching. The truth is not found in any of the extremes of the pendulum. For example, in the lecture number 8 of this course, we studied the laws of evolution and involution, laws to which everything in this world is subject, right? The law of the pendulum is showing us that this process of rising and falling, growing and diminishing is constant and unceasing because nothing escapes it. And in ancient times, however, the dogma of evolution didn't exist. This modern dogma has led many people to believe that humanity has been advancing through a continuous evolutionary process, and that by the mere passing of time, this process will naturally lead us to become like superhuman. But actually, this idea is completely ignoring the law of involution, right? The wise people of ancient times, they understood the law of the pendulum perfectly. They knew that everything that evolves and reaches its highest point will inevitably begin a process of decline, right? A process of involution that cannot be avoided. History itself makes this situation evident. We can observe this, for example, in the great civilizations that have risen and fallen on Earth. Take ancient Egypt, for example. You see that it emerged with tremendous power and grew into a civilization with an extraordinary development. But once it reached its peak, right, the inevitable process of decline began. And Egypt passed to the opposite side of the pendulum, and today nothing remains of that majestic civilization but ruins, right? And later, when Egypt fell, then Jerusalem rose on the other side of the pendulum. And yet, when Israel fell as a great power, the pendulum shifted once again, and the Roman Empire arose at the opposite extreme of the pendulum, right? So, the law of the pendulum has governed the destiny of all the great powers of history. And if we look closely, we will see that absolutely everything, without exception, is subject to the same law. We can, for example, observe how this law applies also to plants, to animals, and to human beings. Same. Take the life of a human being. For example, we grow, we develop, and eventually we reach the stage of life where we enjoy strength, youth, beauty, power. And at that point, it often feels that this state will last forever, right? But that is not true. Inevitably, once that peak is reached in a person's life, the process of decline begins, and the years of old age arrive, bringing with them illnesses, a weakness, and eventually, death. This law actually subject us all to this, and is also evident, for example, in the rise and fall of a company or a business. When a business reaches its highest point, when it is at its most profitably and successful times, it may seem as though it grows, and that like that this growing process will never end. And yet, actually, at the very moment that it reaches this peak, the pendulum begins to swing in the opposite direction. So the movement of this law is relentless, and it is actually unavoidable, right? However, when we begin to understand the deeper purpose of this law, especially when we understand how it operates on our inner world, we gain the ability to use this law as a tool for acquiring wisdom, for reaching the truth. If we carefully observe our own psychology, we're going to see the same law there, constantly working within us. All of our emotions, thoughts, desires oscillate according to the law of the pendulum. Actually, all of humanity is bipolar. We constantly move from liking to disliking, from pleasure to pain, from happiness to sadness. We rarely maintain a state of permanent balance, right? And this happens because our psychological defects themselves are bipolar, right? Each one of our psychological defects has two poles, an active pole and a passive pole. Take laziness, for instance. On one side, there's the active laziness, manifested in that lack of desire to do anything, like the constant urge to rest, to sleep, or to remain inactive. That is the active laziness. But on the other side, there is a passive form, which is like the tendency to stay overly busy with meaningless activities, filling all of our time with trivial personality driven tasks, leaving no energy, right, or motivation for the things that could actually awaken our consciousness. Actually, that is the work of the passive laziness. The same happens, let's say, with greed. On one pole, we find the hoarding, the stingy defect on ourselves, and on the opposite pole, we find the wasteful eye, right? The one that squanders resources without any care, right? At one pole, we find sadness. At other, we find joy. At one pole, we find hatred. At other pole, we find infatuation, right? But here lies a very common mistake that we all make. We often confuse the passive pole of a defect with a virtue. And in reality, virtue is not found in either extreme. Consciousness, wisdom, and reality and what is truth exists only in the center, in the point of balance, beyond the swing of the pendulum. Yet we constantly make the mistake of clinging, to one side of the pendulum, thinking that we can make like that state permanent. We cling to pleasure, for example, believing that it will last forever. But what we fail to see is that the more we attach ourselves to pleasure, the greater the force with which the pendulum will swing back. And inevitably, we will have to experience pain in the same proportion in which we felt the pleasure, right? And the same applies to all our attachments. The more we become attached to something, to a person, to a thing, the more intense our suffering will be when we lose it, right? The pendulum will always swing because that is a law. It is a law that governs everything in this physical world. And the further we go toward one extreme, the more energy we give to the pendulum, and the stronger it will pull us to the opposite extreme. The more excitement that we create, for example, around an expectation, the greater the disappointment that we are going to feel when that expectation is, for example, not fulfilled, right? The more attached we become to acquiring something, the more frustration we are going to feel when we lose it. You see, this is a law. And well, actually, we can also see how this law is manifested within, for example, relationships. You see that at the beginning of a relationship, desire, all our thoughts or our emotions all enter a phase of ascent. There is falling in love, idealization, romance, passion. Everything feels intense, right? However, the stronger this intensity is at the beginning, the stronger the reaction will be when conflicts, misunderstanding, disappointments arise, right? With the same force that passion was once experienced in that relationship, discussions grow heated, affections fades, and even hatred can appear. You can see that. Most couples, if they stay together, end up trapped in this constant pendulum swing, moving from stages of romance and passion to stages of arguments, resentments, and so on. And eventually, a serious conflict arises or boredom sets, right? Or betrayal, of course. And then the relationship ends. But what usually happens? We move on to another partner only to repeat the same pendulum cycle again, just with a different person, but the same sad story. And this is why so many people never find lasting happiness or a stable peace, right? And here lies the deeper truth. This doesn't happen only on relationships. It happens in every aspect of our lives. We spend our entire existence striving for stability, for happiness, for that state of permanent peace. But because we keep seeking them by clinging to one extreme of the pendulum, we never reach the truth. So, how can we break this pattern? That is the important question. Well, actually, it is through observation and reflection, by learning to see both extremes clearly. Take the relationship, for instance. We must observe what triggers our feelings of attraction and affection, as well as what triggers our rejection and resentment towards our partner. Then we must work on those aspects through the practice of psychological depth, eliminating all those psychological defects. When we feel ourselves being carried away by infatuation, by passion, we need to eliminate all those psychological elements within us, that is leading us to that emotional, mental, and even sexual overflow. Likewise, when we are driven by discontent, by coldness, right? By rejection toward our partner, we must also work on those aspects through psychological death, eliminating all those psychological defects that are making us feel that way. And as we do this, something remarkable is going to happen. The pendulum will begin to slow down. So we are going to pass more gently through the center, to that point of balance. And in that state, we begin to see the truth more clearly. This center, this like point of equilibrium, is where understanding actually arises. And to deepen this process, we can use the technique of reflective meditation that we studied in lesson number 22. Because by meditating on the scenes of our lives in which we experienced both poles of a given psychological defect, we can eliminate the inner states that trapped us at both extremes, right? And by eliminating those defects, we are going to be moving toward the center of the pendulum, and only from the center can we truly comprehend, because the truth is found neither in pleasure nor in pain, neither in joy nor in suffering, neither in attraction nor in aversion. The truth is found in balance, in the present moment, in what is permanent. It is in the absence of both pain and pleasure that we discover true happiness. It is in the absence of hatred and infatuation that we uncover what is a true love. And true love is something eternal. True love is something permanent, right? We'll only know peace, real happiness if we free ourselves from the psychological defects that keep us trapped, keep us swinging endlessly from one extreme to the other. However, the egoic mind naturally resists balance, right? To the ego, balance feels like dull and uninteresting, right? The ego prefers to seek constant stimulation, mental, emotional, or sexual stimulation, because that excitement gives our ego our energy and makes it feel alive. So all our ego is going to be rejecting balance, right? But as long as we keep following the ego, we are going to remain bound to the law of the pendulum. And when the pendulum inevitably swings to the opposite pole, we are going to experience emptiness, pain, sadness once again, and we will feel with that pain, that sadness, that emptiness with the same intensity as we once felt the pleasure, right? This is the true purpose of this law, to make us experience both sides of the coin so that we can finally reflect on them. We realize then the truth in that it is not neither on the right left or the right. The truth lies beyond the swing of the pendulum. And well, actually, we can also observe the law of the pendulum in the realm of our beliefs. Whenever we believe in something, or when we reject something, we are simply placing ourselves at one end of the pendulum. In both cases, we are clinging to a concept, to an idea, to belief, and therefore we remain trapped in the swing of this law. For example, we could place the various pseudo-esoteric and pseudo-occultist schools, along with the many religions and sects that exist, on the far right side of the pendulum. And on the far left side, we could place the materialist, Marxist, atheist, right, and skeptical schools of thought. It is very common to see people on those streams and believing they have the truth, right? Take, for instance, a religious fanatic. If something unexpected or deeply disappointing happens, for example, let's say that this religious fanatic has an ill child, sorry, and he is praying fervently for God to save that kid, and only for the child to die. Or let's imagine that person being publicly defeated by an atheist in a debate, right? This person may suddenly swing to the opposite extreme of the pendulum. They may abandon their faith entirely and become an atheist, materialist, or a skeptic. And the reverse also happens. A materialist atheist, when confronted with a profound transcendental event, or in a moment of intense terror, when the plane is about to fall, everyone is a believer, right? They suddenly swing to the other extreme, becoming a fervent religious believer or even a radical fanatic. And this shows something essential. The truth is not found in any concept, nor in any belief, nor in any extreme. But here lies the difficulty. Because we believe we are wise, we cling fanatically to our position, to our theories, to our beliefs, often without any real verification. However, sooner or later, life places us in situations where the pendulum swings, and we may suddenly find ourselves changing positions, abandoning old beliefs, and adapting new ones. And this endless movement between concepts, between ideologies, keep us far from the reality. Neither spiritualist schools nor their materialist opponents can never lead us to the truth. And why? Because both are built upon belief in theories, not upon direct experience, not upon direct verification, right? Actually, spirit and matter are two highly debated and very complex concepts that no one truly understands. If someone asks us, for example, what is matter, we can respond with any definition. It is everything that occupies space. I don't know. Yeah, for example, and if someone asks us, what is the spirit? We might offer several concepts. We could say it is consciousness, universal energy, or we can even say that spirit is God. But all of these are just concepts. In reality, the mind knows nothing about the spirit, and also it knows nothing about the matter. Only when we let go of all concepts, the ones that we hold about one extreme and the other, the ones related to spirituality, the ones related to atheism, the one related to materialism or any other ideology. Only then, when we empty our mind, when we let go of that swinging of concepts and belief, we can give space to direct verification. And it is only through direct experience that we can come to truly know what is the truth. For example, someone might speak to us about astral projection. Or we can even watch lecture 3 of this course and study the practice of astral projection. But unless we actually practice astral projection, all we have about it are concepts. Something we may choose to believe or not believe. We might even collect thousands of other concepts, arguments, theories to support our position that astral projection is real or that it is not if we don't believe in it. Yet, until we practice it for ourselves, until we experience astral projection directly, we will simply remain trapped, swinging endlessly between the concept of one extreme and the concept of the other extreme. And a concept is nothing more than that. A concept. Reality is never a concept. Even though countless concepts can be created about reality. The problem is that we tend to label everything, right? And create concepts in things. And we think that that label, that concept that we have about something is the truth. And it is not. And here's the trap. We believe that the more concepts we accumulate, the wiser we become. But wisdom doesn't come from collecting concepts, never. Because if we never verify things directly, if we never observe reality as it is, we fail to notice that these very concepts are what distance us from true knowledge. The more concepts we have, the less we actually know. Because we haven't personally confirmed any of them. We merely believe them. And the more we fill our minds with concepts and concepts and concepts, the more we'll have to be unlearned in order to truly get to know, right? We must understand that the truth is not found in beliefs. What we think about the truth is not the truth. What we believe about something is not the truth. The truth is what we verify directly. As long as we continue to cling to concepts and belief, we will never reach the truth. The truth isn't in the extreme right or the extreme left. It isn't in defending one concept, attacking another at all. When we defend a position according to our mind, we make ourselves slaves to that concept. We attack those who don't like us or don't believe as we do. If we believe, for example, that God is in one particular place, or we believe that the truth belongs to one religion, or if we are convinced that one theory is the correct one without having even verified it, right? We fool ourselves. We fool ourselves into thinking that we have the truth. And on the other hand, if we reject these things and declare them false, Again, without verification, we fall into the same mistake, into the same trap. In both cases, we become arrogant, believing we are superior to others, convinced that our way of thinking is the right one. And so we defend in the same way we reject thousands of concepts. We argue endlessly, believing that we are defending truth, but in reality, we are only defending a concept. Every psychological discipline is opposed by another discipline. Every logical structured theory is opposed by another equally structured theory. And in the end, what does that leave us with? We may feel smart, wise, superior, but in truth, we are simply slaves to concepts that are not the truth. Because truth, real truth, lies outside of all concepts. The person who clings to one pole of the pendulum, you see that they criticize, they reject, and they attack those who stand on the opposite pole, always believing they are right. But the person who has discovered the center doesn't criticize. The one who has verified the truth doesn't argue. Because when you become one with the truth, you no longer believe you have it. You are the truth. The truth doesn't need to be defended. See, whenever we find ourselves arguing, judging, or criticizing, it is a clear sign that we don't have the truth, that we are simply polarized. So, what is the truth? This is without a doubt one of the most fascinating questions that we can never ask ourselves. When someone once asked Jesus, "What is truth?" the master remained profoundly silent. And when the Buddha was asked the same question, he simply turned his back and walked away. And through these actions, both masters gave us a profound teaching. The truth cannot be conceptualized. Anything that we can say about the truth is not the truth itself. The truth can only be found in inner silence, in the complete absence of all psychological eyes. The truth is the unknown from moment to moment. It doesn't belong to the endless coming and going of theories, beliefs, dogmas. Any concept that the mind can form about the truth is never the truth. Any opinion that we hold about the truth, no matter how respectable or sophisticated it may seem, it is not the truth. To approach it, we must empty ourselves of all those unverified concepts and seek it through direct experience, through personal verification, through our own experimentation, because the truth is not something to be believed. It is not something to be assumed or theorized. Truth is something that must be experienced directly, like when you put your finger in the fire and you get burnt, or like when you swallow water and you drown, like that. Only through living personal experience can we truly know the truth. So, where are we going to find the truth? The truth is found at the center of the pendulum, nor on the extreme right, nor on the extreme left. To reach the truth, we must first learn to observe and recognize where, how, and why we are polarized, whether in our concepts, our beliefs, or any of our psychological tendencies. Only when we are able to observe the movement of our inner pendulum can we begin to dissolve through psychological death those aspects of ourselves that keep us trapped on one extreme or on the other. The center of the pendulum actually lies within us, in inner silence. When we manage to be fully present, completely living the present moment, practicing self-observation and psychological depth, it is precisely there that we must discover and directly experience what is real, what is the truth. We will only find the truth in inner silence. When we dissolve the psychological eyes that are all the time talking in our minds, right? When we eliminate all those ways of being that manifest also through desire and through our emotion, can we truly know? Because only pure consciousness, that is what arises when we apply psychological depth, can experience consciousness. And only through a psychological depth practice can the essence, what is the real within us, be liberated, and then that what is real can get to manage to understand what is the reality. The truth has nothing to do with what has been said or not said, written or unwritten. It only reveals itself when the ego has completely died. So we must know that, and actually nowadays our mind is deeply conditioned, invaded by all those psychological defects. So the truth will come when we manage to understand how to truly die in ourselves and how to recognize both poles of a defect, eliminate them to reach the center. We fail to reach for the truth in thinking, right? To thinking that by learning about something, hearing about something, thinking, yeah, making concept about something, we will reach the truth. We need to find the truth in the center, right? And it will come to us spontaneously when we have eliminated all those psychological defects that are constantly there, talking in our mind. We must learn to find the critical point where the truth resides, where consciousness awakens. The pendulum of life is always swinging. At one extreme, we convince ourselves that we find the truth, that we have it, yet inevitably, we are going to move to the other pole, to the other extreme, and this endless motion teaches us something profound. The truth cannot be found in either extreme. We must learn to find that critical point, that center where the pendulum lives. In ourselves, we have our inner pendulum, and it is also constantly swinging from mind to desire, from thoughts to impulses. And so, if we want to reach true understanding in any situation, we must avoid becoming polarized. We must neither fall into overthinking nor be carried away by desire. Instead, we must keep our inner pendulum balanced. This balance is achieved by staying fully present, anchored in our hearts, in a state of inner silence. And whenever a situation arises that triggers us a psychological reaction, when we feel the urge to form an opinion, to judge, to criticize, to doubt, we must observe ourselves. We need to notice the movement of our inner pendulum and bring it back to balance, right? And only in that state of balance, in that silence, in that wakeful, self-remembering state, can our consciousness manifest. And when, on the other extreme, desires arises, we observe them, we dissolve them, and we return again to our heart. When thoughts and justifications appear, we eliminate them and return again to our hearts. And there, within the heart, it is that we receive the wisdom of the Father, which comes from the pineal gland to us as an intuition. So this is how, by practicing psychological death from moment to moment, is how we keep our inner pendulum balanced. And by doing so, we arrived at understanding. And understanding is a faculty of the heart that allows us to reconcile opposites and see reality as it is. And well, this has been today's lecture. I will leave you with this remarkable phrase to reflect on. Of what use it is for a man to know 1,000 theories if he has never experienced the truth. And well, remember that if you have any question on this topic, you can leave your questions there in the comment box, and we'll be gladly solving any question that you have. And if you want to make part of our WhatsApp or Telegram groups to receive complimentary material on all of these lectures, you can find the link to join us here in the description of this video. And well, I want to invite you to join us in our next Phase A lecture, in which we're going to explore the method to awaken consciousness. There we are going to see the two forms of consciousness that we all have, the objective and the subjective, and you're going to see that is a truly fascinating topic that will learn us how we can awaken our objective consciousness and to free and awaken our subjective consciousness. So thank you very much to all of you for being here, attending this lecture. Thank you for sharing this lecture with everyone. And well, see you the next time. Bye-bye.